Generally speaking, I just believe that in almost any market conditions, like value add is like a great proven moneymaker. And Burr takes advantage of that, just buying something that is far below its highest and best use and bringing it up to its highest best use is always going to make money, in any type of market. And Burr does that, but maybe now the refinance part is not as attractive as it used to be. But that doesn't mean that buying, C-class properties and turning them to A-class properties is no longer profitable. I think that is still very profitable, especially for flippers right now. I think a lot of people are scared of flipping, but all the data and evidence suggests that flipping is actually quite lucrative right now. And for bringing up rent values to higher levels and hopefully getting properties to cash flow. So to me, that's the stuff that I'm looking at is opportunities for heavy value add.
Welcome to the Real Estate Law Podcast. Thank you again for listening to us. Rory Gill, attorney, real estate broker, Jason Youth here. Rory, we've talked a lot about BiggerPockets on this podcast. We certainly have done lots of long drives listening to the BiggerPockets podcast and On the Market and Real Estate Rookie and all those fun ones that have been the soundtrack of our drives down to see my family in New York or go visit properties up in New Hampshire. Rory, how many times would I rather listen to BiggerPockets than, the music that I usually have on?
About 100% of the time. And, all this predates our involvement in real estate investing and, why we have so much kind of deference and excitement for today for the institution of BiggerPockets is that while we were in real estate law and real estate brokering, we weren't really in real estate and investing until we really kind of caught the bug. And it took us a little while, but now we've gained a lot of traction. So, I'm excited to speak to just about every guest that we have on here, but I'm extra excited today to connect with our guest.
Yeah, there's a funny story as to how this came together, but somehow we're talking to the VP of Data and Analytics of BiggerPockets, Mr. Dave Meyer. Dave, welcome to our podcast.
Guys, thank you both so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, the pleasure is ours. We met really quickly in passing at BPCon last year. You would never remember it, but I did. And then suddenly this past year, we're having lunch, coffee. Rory, what were we doing? We were meeting up with the folks from Hudkins Law right there in the lobby of New Kitchen in Newburyport, right?
It was the meet and greet. The families that we'll be working with all kind of came together for a meet and greet, and then something caught your attention on the sidelines.
Yeah, and while Dave had the great fortune of diverting his drive off 95 and joining us here in the lovely city of Newburyport, Massachusetts, on his way to his wedding, little did he know that the excellent restaurant that he picked, New Kitchen, which is our favorite place, that we go there all the time and have lots of meetings over lunch and coffee and everything. In walks Dave Meyer when we're right there in the lobby having our meeting. And I'm like, wait a second, like, what on earth are you doing here, Dave, is what I'm thinking. And, I didn't say anything. And then you kind of went off and you're with your now lovely wife. You were having lunch. And when we were done, I said to Rory, Rory, I need to go say hi to somebody. I'll be right back. And, usually what that means in Newburyport is like our neighbor, right? Our neighbor literally owns New Kitchen, like right up the street from us. Okay. We know people in town, like you bump into people all the time. You don't bump into people like yourself who don't live here and just happen to be passing through. So sorry about accosting you that day, Dave.
No, this is great. It was so fun.
and we hope that you enjoyed, your short time here in Newburyport, but congratulations on your wedding. I know you shared a couple pictures on Instagram. It looked like a lovely New England wedding. How did everything go?
It was great. It was so much fun. And we loved Newburyport. Just before we even saw you, we were driving through like, this town is so nice. I can't believe we just picked this random place to pull off on I-95. We were driving from Boston up to Maine. We were hungry. Jane found a restaurant that she thought looked good, and it was lovely. And it's so funny. Like I don't normally get recognized. The real estate community is small, but it was the first time I've ever been with Jane when someone actually knew who I was, and she got a real kick out of it. And has been making fun of me ever since. But, so that was it. That was a fun experience for us. But the wedding went great. You know this, but New England is so beautiful and wonderful people and a very fun, unique experience in life where you get to have all your closest family and friends surrounding you. It's a wonderful experience.
We are going to a wedding in Maine in a couple of weeks. We've been to lovely Maine weddings in the past.
Nice.
It is an excellent place to get married in the summertime in New England. Sorry that I've created that story for Jane to make fun of you that you were recognized, but
It's okay.
I mean, you must not get recognized that much in Amsterdam where you're living, right?
That's right. Yeah. So yeah, we're in the States a couple times a year. But I have actually once been noticed in Amsterdam, which was very funny because it's still hard for me to like consider that people know who I am because like 2 years ago, I had never been on a podcast or YouTube. And so it's been a rapid change that even anyone would recognize me is pretty surprising.
I was at BPCon last year. Got my sticker right here.
Oh,
BPCon
nice.
2020, San Diego. And I took an elevator ride with Henry Washington, one of the random days. Yeah. And, big smiling guy, just the two of us in the elevator, make a little small talk. I said, Henry, what is it like to be a massive celebrity at an event like this and then go back to your life of, anonymity where nobody really knows who you are? And he just smiled and laughed at that. And that's probably, how you experience BPCon as well.
Yeah, I always say to Jane and my friends that I'm famous for 1 week a year, one weekend a year, which is enough. That's perfect for me. I've never had aspirations to be famous, but BPCon is so much fun. But if you're a media facing part of BiggerPockets, it's definitely a whirlwind because people know who you are and everyone wants to talk. And honestly, it's one of my favorite couple of days of the year. It's extremely energizing and just so fun to be within the community and meeting people and just talking shop. It's fantastic.
Rory, how long have I talked about wanting to go to BPCon? I mean,
No, you've been talking about it every single year. Probably we started listening to BiggerPockets, and this past year, last year, kind of famously for people who listen to our podcast, was when you left W-2 work and kind of jumped into real estate investing full time. So this was your opportunity to attend BPCon and to kind of embrace the community, and that's what you've been building up this entire time.
Yeah. You say that very kindly. I say that, my job ended, as my way of saying it. But, it was a easy transition into the world of short-term rentals, which is what I'm doing right now. I've talked about that a lot on this podcast. Dave, we have 5 properties right now that we own and operate up in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. And, that would not have been possible without, communities like BiggerPockets. When did you get started with BiggerPockets? I mean, it was probably last decade, right?
Yeah, it was. I started as an employee back in 2016, so like 7.5 years ago.
Okay, I think my profile dates back to like 2015, actually.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, gee.
I might have you beat there. But how did you kind of transition from just being a employee, even though nobody's just a just? I've said that on this podcast.
Yeah.
But you were an employee to, I don't know, suddenly being this media presence and this face of the brand. I remember a couple of years ago, you started popping up on my, feeds, Instagram, Facebook. And I'm like, oh, I think that guy works for BiggerPockets. Next thing you know, On the Market is this big deal and you're writing books and, you're doing Instagram reels constantly.
Not all of them. Yeah.
How did all that come about?
It was a gradual thing. I joined BiggerPockets as in growth marketing. I have a master's degree in data analytics. And so I, ran the business intelligence and data teams and did some product work and all sorts of stuff. And then in end of 2019, and during that time, when I was living in Denver, Josh Dorkin, the founder of BiggerPockets, would, kind of encourage me to make content, but I was never really that into it. I was primarily concerned with my career as an analyst and wanted to build software and that sort of stuff. And then I moved to Amsterdam in 2020, and my role naturally had to sort of change to be a little bit less operational. But I was still doing a lot of BiggerPockets, and then COVID hit, and everyone was just sort of crazed about what was going on. And people wanted to know, like, is the market going to crash? Are rents going to crash? All these things. And I, in addition to being an analyst, I've always sort of just been interested in economics. And I started writing because there was this intense need for real-time information. And it just caught on, and people really liked the real-time information. And to my surprise and delight, even beyond COVID, even beyond the most acute panic that happened in the first half of 2020 surrounding the real estate market, people have remained interested. For me, the confusing economy has been good for business. And so we've really uncovered that real estate, which I believe for a long time, the predominant media presence was about motivation and success stories and sort of tactical advice, which is hugely important. Don't get me wrong. But I think there's a class of investor that really wants to understand the analytical and technical part of investing. Similar to the stock market, you see people who just buy index funds. You see people want to do technical analysis, want to pick individual funds. I think we've really latched on to something at BiggerPockets here where people really want to understand how their investments fit in sort of the larger economy. And so we just keep growing and growing it at BiggerPockets, and thankfully it's been really successful. And maybe thankfully it's been a lot of fun too. I have a lot of fun doing it.
How do you go about breaking down some really technical information, economics, finance, and make it palatable and interesting and approachable to just the average person who's watching it in short snippets?
It's a great question. It's really hard. I think the number one thing is to just understand, make sure I like really understand things in a complicated way. I mean, if you just have a surface level of understanding, it's really hard to explain something to anyone. And I really try to do my best possible job to understand multiple perspectives. For better or worse, in our country, a lot of economics is politicized these days. And I really do my best to try and read analysis and data from multiple sources to make sure that I'm not getting any sort of unbiased information, any super biased information, or at least that I can square that information so that I can see it from multiple sides. But I think the key is really tying it back to people's own individual experiences. There are plenty of people who can go up and say the housing market's going up, housing market's going down. But I think if you can use stories, honestly, to explain data and help people relate what's going on in this broad macro sort of confusing way to like what they see every single day, is the most effective way I've found, at least, to try and explain some of these more technical topics.
And I know in the world of, dealing with a lot of real estate brokers from across the country, every real estate broker wants to say that their market is the hottest market in the country. Their market is doing great. Now is the best time in humanity to buy right here in, in our town. So we have to kind of punch through that bias just a little bit. But the truth is, these answers are always, it depends. How is the market doing? There's never, you probably get asked all the time, what's the hottest market? What's the best market? But the truth is, the answer to this always is, it depends.
100%. It totally is. It depends on so many different things. And a lot of them are not even macroeconomic. They're personal finance questions. What's the best market? Depends what you want. For some people, Detroit might be the best market because they're looking for really good cash flow and they're willing to, take on a risk of perhaps stagnant or declining property values in a city like Detroit or maybe elsewhere in the Midwest. Some people just want appreciation. It's a total personal choice. In the same way, you can't say like one stock is the best stock or one investment is better than another. It really depends on personal choice. And I do think sort of, in some ways, the work I do and we do at BiggerPockets to identify good markets, it's helpful to people, but I also should do a better job explaining that you're splitting hairs sometimes between like several good markets, and people are like, oh, should I invest in this great market or this one? I'm like, it doesn't matter. Or just like whichever one you can find a better team, where do you have a better property manager, or where is more affordable? And so I think that there's a lot of good markets, and the idea that there's like one best one is probably something that we perpetrate, not perpetrate, but like we sort of put into the world, and that we not shouldn't necessarily do that, because there are plenty of great places to invest.
And just to make this more about us, I mean, here in New England, we, despite kind of having a larger population in the Northeast, we don't really get as much attention, I think, in a lot of the either BiggerPockets or just other real estate blogs out there, just because we're never the strongest market in the country, but we're never the weakest. We kind of get past, we're never the hottest market. We're never the market that's totally in distress. I always call us up here in New England the slow and steady, the boring market that, slow and steady may win the race for a lot of people. We're never going to have the cash flow as some of the upper Midwest, but we'll never see the flash in the pan as Florida, but we're kind of slow and steady. So, is there anything to make this about us? Anything that we should use to categorize the Northeast?
I think the Northeast is a great place to invest. Actually, I was looking at it recently because we had such a great time in New England when we were up there. And I'm from the Northeast originally, so I was like, man, I forgot how great it is here. I think that it is often overlooked because for a long time it was seen as relatively expensive, but I think that's sort of changed over the last couple of years, where not that things have gotten cheaper in the Northeast, but relative to other markets, it's become much more sort of middle of the pack. The great thing about the Northeast is that, like, even though it's middle of the pack, like the economy is just extremely strong in the Northeast, and like, you see consistent job growth, wage growth, all the things that you want to see in the Northeast. And I think people look at some of the data from COVID, like, oh, New York lost a lot of area. Yeah, like Manhattan lost a lot of people. That's true, but New York is a giant state, and there's lots, not that I don't think New York's not technically New England, right? But in the Northeast in general, like, or if you look at the New York metro area, like, there are tons of places in Southern Connecticut that are, considered metro New York that are exploding right now, because all the people who had left Manhattan just went there. So I think there are a lot of strong fundamentals in the Northeast, and generally just in real estate. I think people always want this hot market, or like you said, put it well, like a flash in the pan. But if you just want solid, steady growth, if you want a portfolio that's going to do well for you for 20 or 30 years, like, I think the Northeast is probably as good as it gets.
It's great that we don't have as much reach as BiggerPockets does, because you're saying it on our podcast and not a BP one. So not everyone's going to go running to the Northeast now, but you guys have quite a platform, and sometimes you're market makers unintentionally, right? BiggerPockets talks to a lot of people, and a lot of times by the time you've identified the trend, it might be a little bit too late to get into that trend if you're not already there.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing about real estate, is like, it doesn't work like stocks. Like, it takes a while for these trends to emerge. And so if you see like, oh, if you're reading an article that like blah, blah, blah is the top market, it's probably a little bit late, or it's already really expensive. And so, yeah, I think we do have some influence on where people choose to invest. But my hope is that what we do is help people realize that different markets and different real estate tactics offer different benefits, and that there's not like, what's good and what works well in New England might not be what works well in Florida or works well in California, but there are tactics that work well in pretty much every market. I personally just think that's a better way to look at it. It's like, you have to decide for yourself, like, do you want to invest in, let's just say New England. Do you want to invest in New England? Great. Then you can choose the tactics that work in New England. If you want cash flow, you may have to go outside of New England, but that's okay. Like, you could just, that's your objective. You really just have to choose what's most important to you.
Aside from, where to invest, we've noticed a strong evolution in on the advice on how to invest for the history of BiggerPockets. I mean, BiggerPockets emerged kind of in the heyday, the golden age of the Burr method, when property was relatively cheap, rates were low, and of course, markets shift and things have to change. And now we're hearing kind of across the real estate world, the Burr is now just one of many methods of investing in real estate. Is that a fair characterization? And what are some, not necessarily markets to invest in, but what are some strategies that are emerging in the market here in 2023?
I think that is fair. I think people have been really focused on Burr for a while, and with good reason. It's, it was very conducive. The market was very conducive to Burr for a long time. I think Burr still can work. I think there's just this idea that, like, for a Burr to be successful, you have to be able to withdraw 100% of your equity. And that seems like it's not going to happen right now. But you could still, contribute equity and refinance 20, 30, 50% out and still use some of that money to keep growing your portfolio. I think it is not going to be easy in today's day and age for you to pull out 100% of your equity and just keep repeating this over and over again. So I do think that's true. But generally speaking, I just believe that in almost any market conditions, like, value add is like a great proven moneymaker. And Burr takes advantage of that. Just buying something that is far below its highest and best use and bringing it up to its highest best use is always going to make money, in any type of market. And Burr does that, but maybe now the refinance part is not as attractive as it used to be. But that doesn't mean that buying, C-class properties and turning them to A-class properties is no longer profitable. I think that is still very profitable, especially for flippers right now. I think a lot of people are scared of flipping, but all the data and evidence suggests that flipping is actually quite lucrative right now. And for bringing up rent values to higher levels and hopefully getting properties to cash flow. So to me, that's the stuff that I'm looking at, is for just opportunities for heavy value add.
These were topics that came up last year in the halls of BPCon 2022, when the interest rates had just spiked and everyone kind of thought maybe that was a temporary spike. And here we are a year later and it's still here. But let's talk about conferences like that, because this is where you can emerge and see what trends are out there. I think I went to a couple of your panels last year. I think you talked about inflation data on one of them. Talk about what you're going to talk about this year at you're a keynoter at
Yes,
BPCon.
I am.
I mean, that's a freaking big deal.
Thank you. Yeah, I was kind of shocked they asked me to do that, but I'm very excited about it. I was actually working on the presentation today, so it's good timing. So I'm doing 2 panels this year. The first one is about portfolio strategy, which is the topic of a book I have coming out in January. And that's basically similar to what we were just talking about, which is like trying to identify what you care about and then working backwards to identify like the tactics that you should be using. So like, do you care about cash flow? When do you want to retire? How much money do you have? And like figuring out the right deals to buy based on your personal situation. So that's one. For the keynote, I'm going to do my best to try and explain the economy, which is always very difficult. But I think I'm going to, my intention is to do something a little bit different, which is not offer a forecast for what's going to happen, but I don't know if you guys have come across the concept of scenario planning, which is similar what a lot of businesses do, which is basically like, we think there's basically 3 or 4 directions the economy or our industry might go in the next 3 or 4 years. And we are going to come up with plans based on each of those 3 or 4 possibilities. And I think that's really what most real estate investors need right now, because we don't know. And there are a lot of variables that are not yet settled in the housing market. I have my ideas of what I think might happen. But I think it's really helpful to just understand the different things that could play out and how you should react if, any of those 3 scenarios do come to fruition. Because I think what you see through doing these exercises is that you can continue to invest even in the worst case scenario. You just have to, again, adjust your tactics and adjust what you're doing based on, shifting market conditions.
Mm-hmm. It sounds similar to kind of these classic SWOT analyses that we used to do back in, when I worked for large media companies in sales. We're looking at the strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats of every situation. And if you're kind of digging into a few different, pathways, that's like a SWOT analysis for each of those pathways for what could happen.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what happens if mortgage rates go higher? What happens
Yeah.
if mortgage rates go down by 3%? What if they stay flat for the next 4 years? Like, those are all reasonable scenarios. Like, we don't know which of those is going to play out. To me, that's the biggest variable in the housing market right now is mortgage rates. And so I personally like having a plan for each of those three scenarios, and even trying to prescribe some probability of each one so that I can say like, hey, I think, 75% chance like mortgage rates are going to stay high. I'm not saying I'm making that number up. But just like, because without that, it's so hard to act. I find where you just keep having these ideas in your head and they're swirling. You're like, what if inflation goes up? Blah, blah, blah. You have like all these ideas and it's hard to like come up with a plan. So I think it's much easier to come up with a thesis that you can act on if you just say like, here are the variables. I don't know what's going to happen, but like if I understand the variables, I can at least do my best to mitigate risk and continue to make progress, because doing nothing, in my opinion, is like the worst of all options because you miss out on opportunity inevitably.
The next first option is doing the same thing over and over when the situation changes, like, which for a decade, people have been able to refinance, a lot of their money out of properties as they improve them because rates were so low. Things changed. If people didn't know how to adapt, then they're going to be stuck. But the people that know how to adapt to a different situation like that, those are the ones that will probably find the opportunity. All right. Is this your first, like your biggest speech you've done in front of people, like your keynote?
I think it is. Yeah, it will
Yeah.
be.
Well, and it's just you on the stage, or do you have a panel?
No, it's just me.
Wow, they're throwing you out there, huh? All right, that's
Yes.
confidence. You'll be fine. I mean,
Yes.
you
No,
talk. Yeah.
I'm not worried about it. Honestly, I like public speaking. It doesn't worry me standing on this front of the stage. The topic is hard because everyone just wants to know what's going to happen with the
Mhm.
economy, but no one knows. So I'm trying to come up with the right way to help people understand the variables without telling them what's going to happen, because I don't know.
Yeah. Now, is it like a Q&A situation afterward, like where you can plant a couple questions out there, that people.
I have not considered planting questions, but there will be Q&A.
Okay. Talk a bit about BPCon though. Like, can I give my opinion a little bit? Like I'm going to, because I'm
Please.
talking right now. But like, it's big. It is a big event. It can be overwhelming if you don't know what to expect. I mean, there's a 2,000 attendees. Is that right? 2,500,
I think it's gonna
3,000?
be, yeah, 25 or
Yeah.
3,000 this year.
And, they're from all different walks of life. And if you just go bright eyed, and absorb it, you might find your way to the right groups of people. If you go expecting that you're going to be directed in the right direction, you have to put a little responsibility on yourself. I think that BP did a really great job with that lunch the first day last year, where they had people sit at a table that was the color of what you want to talk about, basically.
Yeah,
You
that
kind of
was awesome.
put pins on your tag saying, I'm interested in long-term rentals or short-term rentals or finance or this, that. So you can try to at least have some kind of icebreaker with the people that are around you. But it's a big group of folks that are all there to hear from the same people. I think everyone there is a super fan, so they all know you and the rest of the VP authors. And it can be a lot, right? If you don't really know what to expect. So what's some advice that you might have to a first time attendee that is attending BPCon this year?
I think that's very good advice. Is trying to really have an objective, because it can be overwhelming and it goes by fast. Like there's a lot of programming, but it really is stimulation overload, at least in my experience. I think that networking is the best thing that you can do, and just like putting yourself out there, just striking up conversations with as many people as you can. I've met a lot of interesting people that way, and I've met a lot of friends that way. And I think, you meet a lot of people and you will get exposed to a lot of opportunity, but the benefit really comes from after the conference, in my opinion. Like what you do with the people, the relationships that you make and the information. Like after. That's what matters. Like, you're not going to, I mean, you could do a deal while you're there, but realistically, you're there to source opportunity, and then you have to follow up on that opportunity and make it into something real. And so I just encourage people to really keep up the momentum. Like, if you go to this is BPCon or anything else, but like, it can be so stimulating and exhausting that you get, I think we've called it like the conference hangover right afterward, where you're sort of like exhausted and tired. But I think that's the most important time to like really just try and keep up that momentum. And, maybe even if there's someone who you thought like, oh, maybe they're not really interested, just to put yourself out there and, send out emails, send a text, make a call, and follow up and see if you can turn, something that's just potential into something real in the days or weeks after the conference.
Or you could have the conference hangover beforehand, which is what happened to me, because I got out there a little bit early, and a good friend of Rory's and mine, Jonathan, took me out for a Sunday fun day, which got a little out of hand. So yeah,
that's also part of the conference, is a lot of hangovers.
Very much so. In fact, I ended up at a STR meetup in San Diego, which I knew about, but the Sunday Funday was before then, and I don't know how coherent I was at that event, because then I saw the people the next day, and they're like, "Dude, do you remember talking to us yesterday?" I'm like, "I remember being there, but I don't exactly remember what we talked about, and forgive me." And they laughed. So
no, that is a big part of it. It's also a very fun party. This year they're renting out Harry Potter World as part of the conference. So the last it's in Orlando, so I think that's Universal. The last event is going to be a rent out of Harry Potter World, which should be super fun.
That is wild. Rory and I were just at Harry Potter World for a convention of his, last year, 2 years ago? When was that?
That was in 22. It was last year.
Yeah. It was not a private event at Harry Potter World, though. That would have been sweet, because it was. Have you been there yet, Dave?
No, I've never been. So like, this will be my first time ever.
It's wild. I mean, it's just wild. Like, I'm not a Harry Potter super fan, but like, I definitely read the books and saw the movies, and I thought it was just really cool to be involved in the environment that Universal put together as part of that. So if you are going to BPCon this year, do not miss that. I don't know what's in store at the event, but you want to be at Harry Potter World, especially for a private event.
I don't know what's going on either, but Alex Palet, the woman in charge of BPCon, is an excellent party thrower. So I have full faith that it'll be. It was
a great closing event last year. There was a yacht rock party, I think it was last year.
Yes.
I ended up so two big takeaways I had last year from BPCon. One happened at the closing event where we met. Rory, I met Dave and Mark from Host Pros out of Cleveland at that event randomly, and they've become good friends. I've seen them at STR WealthCon in Nashville. We've had them on this podcast. I see them on social all the time. They're operators in Ohio, and they run a business probably better than anybody else locally in Ohio for short-term rental management, and really, really good guys. And I totally monopolized their time for like 2 hours, like at that event. That's why like I didn't get to go hang out dancing with the Yacht Rock crew, but we had a good time there. And then the other big takeaway,
making important connections.
Going to events like that, if you could take away a handful of meaningful new contacts, that is much more important than a long list of 200 people that you met.
100%. Yes.
Actually, two other takeaways I had. One, the other one was at the tax planning event that I went to, or the workshop last year. I learned about cost segregation studies, and I'm so embarrassed that we didn't know about that leading into that event. And I came home and I said to Rory, I'm like, we need to do this immediately. And like, boom, we did 2 cost segs last year, and it was just like such an eye-opening
was
experience.
That with Amanda Hahn?
No, we used Cost Segregation Authority. They were on the panel.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I forget the gentleman's name that was on the panel, but I wrote the name down of the speaker, and I'm like, I'm just going to use this company. Like, no due diligence. I was like, BP's got this. They wouldn't put him on the stage if they didn't if they weren't the real deal. So
they pick good panelists. So
yeah, I think Amanda does.
Yeah,
she's a CPA, right? I think she does things a little differently. The other big takeaway I had at BPCon was the amount of people that were filming content. Right. So like it's the us's of the world, the me's that are going there interviewing people. And I think you guys even had a podcast studio there for some select people to use, which I thought was
Yes, they did.
that was pretty cool.
Yeah, they're always, yeah, like people bringing, interviewing people, just asking questions, making content. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, there's a lot of people just mixing it up and asking you to speak and give your opinion. So it's definitely a thrilling thing to be a part of.
Do you feel like you have to become a hermit for like the week or two afterward if it's just been stimulus overload?
Uh, a little bit. Honestly, I just lose my voice is the hardest part. I did last year, and I'm sure I will again this year. And I definitely think it's everyone on BiggerPockets, all the staff that goes, like, kind of just takes the rest of the week off. It's like a lot to do, or just honestly, it's nice to just get back and answer some emails. I love talking to people. It's so fun. It like really is like the highlight of my year. But yeah, like you said, it's just so much packed into 3 days that you definitely have even if you don't drink, there's like a mental hangover for a few days.
Yeah. Hey, Rory, any final thoughts for Dave before we get to our final 3 questions that we ask of everybody?
I just want to ask a slightly different question. We talked about kind of the trends from the perspective of the investor, but I want to bring in part of our audience, such as real estate agents, people who make a living out of volume in this market, and that's what has dried up substantially now. If you're in those professions, asking for a friend that relies on volume, what would you be doing right now in your business to prepare for the potential possibilities in the upcoming markets?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in like the operations of being an agent or anything. I'm not one myself. But I will be honest, like if I had to guess, I would expect volume to stay low for the foreseeable future. I don't think it's going to get worse, really. That's my guess, but I do just think that this inventory issue is going to take a little while to sort itself out, and that's really the source of this problem. That, or maybe we get a break on interest rates and mortgage rates, but I'm not expecting that anytime soon. So I do think the more you can do to help people find affordable products, maybe try and work with new construction. I don't know how people do that, but that is an increasing share of the volume that's going up. It's usually like 11%. It's about 30% now. And so I don't know, how you form those relationships, but if you can get in on some of those trends, or build to rent, there does seem to be volume in those sectors. They could be really good. But that being said, like, I think honestly, it's just about being good at what you do. Like there's still a lot of volume. There's still going to be several million home sales. And there are tons of brokers out there. And I think the mentality is sort of like the pros need to buckle down and take as much market share as they can for the people who do this part-time, as like, sort of as their side hustle. Because, if this is your full-time business, there's definitely still enough volume to make it your living. But, I think you have to compete a little bit against the people who are just doing this opportunistically.
Yeah. I mean, we can go on
I
and
don't
on
know if
about
you
that
guys have any
topic.
thoughts on that, but it's definitely not my specialty. But I feel for the whole industry. I mean, it's really tough situation right now.
I don't know, for somebody who's claiming not to be an expert in that space, you just gave one of the, a really coherent answer to that question. So thank you.
Okay, good. I have a lot of
Dave,
friends who are agents, so hopefully,
yeah.
hopefully I've learned something.
But yeah, I mean, you give such great advice. I mean, you probably don't even realize it, but there's so many people that kind of hang on, what you say with On the Market and all of your daily updates on Instagram. Were you an economist, like, and by trade at all, or no? Yeah.
No, just an analyst. I do have training as a data analyst, so I have a lot of experience looking at data sets and like extrapolating and using statistical methods to like extrapolate how patterns might play out into the future.
Mhm.
And so I think naturally a lot of people who get into data analysis get into economics because there's so much data. It's like there's so much to play with. It's like either that or baseball because there's a lot of
Yeah.
stats there too. I just have always had an interest in it. And you asked me earlier, I find that a lot of economics is so boring. And so, on our show on the market or just on Instagram, I just try and make it fun. I think that to answer your question earlier, I think that's just so important to getting people to listen to it and understand it, is just having fun with it and making you realize that it doesn't have to be so serious and technical all the time.
Yeah, and boring, like law. I mean, we didn't even talk about law on this, but that's okay. We never do.
Thank
so
you
so
for sparing me, because not that it's
yes.
boring. I appreciate it. I just don't know a thing about it.
Well, we every so often we'll sprinkle in a question about like a legal situation that people will come up, but you come up with. But we can pass on that for this episode. So let's wrap things up with the last three questions. We ask these of all of our guests. The first one is going to be a complete layup, and I swear this question we ask everybody. But the question is, if you can get on stage for half an hour and talk about any subject in the world with zero preparation, what would that be?
That's so funny. I think right now I would say, instead of economics, because that's boring, I would say about personalization of your real estate portfolio. That's like my big passion right now in the book I'm writing. I just think, God, there's so many people on Instagram are like, you have to do BRRRR, you got to be in short-term rentals, or do creative finance. And like we talked about, it's so much, it depends. But that's a daunting answer, because then people have to go and figure it out for themselves. And so I've spent a lot of time coming up with like a decision-making framework to help people figure out like what is the right real estate strategy for them. And I'm just really passionate about it, because I think hopefully my hope is that it will help more people who wouldn't have gotten into real estate to realize that there is a strategy for them to achieve really whatever financial goal they want. Like, you don't have to be a tycoon. You don't have to want to quit your job. Like, there are many modest goals that people have. When I first started investing in real estate, I had no dream of quitting my job. I just wanted some cash. That's a totally fine goal. And my hope is that I can help some people and bring that conversation more to the forefront, that like, you don't need to quit your job. There's a lot of good ways to get into real estate, no matter what your personal financial situation is or your personal goals are.
Yeah. Plus, you're in a situation that is like aspirational to many. It's like, wait, this guy's a real estate investor plus works for BiggerPockets, is the face of the brand. I mean, like, that's the kind of cool job. Like, it's a boring desk job.
I did luck out. Yeah. So it's easy for me to say like, yeah, I don't want to quit my job because I have a great job.
Yeah.
I understand that some people do. But even before, like, I started investing in real estate when I had a crappy job. I was waiting tables. And I actually didn't hate that job, but my job, that was never my goal, and I think the popular thing is to say like, oh, use real estate to quit your job, but like, use real estate to secure your retirement, use real estate to work less, like there's tons of good ways to do it. And so I hope that we can all, as the real estate community, sort of normalize some of those other ambitions and ways to invest in real estate that aren't just like all or nothing, where you have to be like all in all the time.
Second question. Tell us something happened early in your life or career that impacts the way you're working today.
Oh, God. I guess one thing is like, my parents, when I was a kid in like the 2000 bubble, my dad lost his job, and my parents had just gotten divorced, and it put our family in some like pretty bad financial turmoil. And it really impacts you, or like as a kid, it really impacted me, and it like made me want financial freedom from like an extremely young age. I feel like since I've been like 11, I was like, I'm not letting that happen to me. And so I think that that's probably something that has impacted me far before I even uncovered real estate and the potential to it. I've just like always wanted to find a way to not rely on other people for my income.
Yeah. We hear a lot that, family situations that happened a long time ago, really are the North Star that allows people to kind of lead them down the pathway that they're on today. So thanks for sharing that. Final question. Tell us something you're listening to or watching or reading these days. Anything in the world.
Oh God. I sort of, I don't know about you guys. I like oscillate back and forth from reading like business books to like the complete opposite. And so I just started read a really nerdy like fantasy trilogy that was really good, called The Poppy Wars. It was really good. Like I'm a big like Lord of the Rings fan and Dune and all those types of things. So that is something I was just reading. But listening to there's a blogger named Tim Urban. I don't know if you guys have ever heard the blog called Wait But Why.
Yeah.
He does these like really funny stick figure animations of like really complicated topics, and he wrote a book called What's Wrong with Us, and it's just about like a lot of the political polarization in the United States and how it's impacting the whole society. And I just thought it's super interesting book. And it's really, I've always liked him because I think he does a very good job of presenting information from both sides. And I think it's a really good articulation of what I think a lot of people are feeling about American society right now. So I really liked it.
Yeah. I feel like I'm on their email list because like every so often I get a periodic email out of the blue that's a really long email from with stick figure drawings and
Yes.
everything. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like he writes like one blog post a year. It's like,
Yeah. But it's a good blog. It's always a good blog post. I always read the whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll certainly have to dig deep into how the rest of the world thinks about America from a European perspective on another podcast.
Yeah.
That's probably another couple of hours, Dave.
Yeah. That's a whole other topic.
I do have a final bonus question. Like, what is with the zany video thumbnails that we see? Like
I don't know, man. Oh, God, I can do the faces now. It's like, so I don't know how it started. Some YouTuber started this, and at BiggerPockets, they did some testing and realized it worked. And so whenever we're in Denver, like once or twice a year, they'll get all like the hosts and authors together and we do some like bonding and some teamwork stuff. And they like literally make us go to a green screen and make like the stupidest faces you could ever possibly imagine.
Right.
And Jane, my wife, just saw them for the first time because she's like has no interest in real estate, which I love. It's like nice to sort of have the separation. And she saw them, she was like, "What is that?" And like was laughing so hard. And I showed her like the full gallery of me just standing in front of a green screen making stupid faces, and she was like, "This is such a gold mine. It's so bad." So I don't know, but apparently it works. It gets people to download or watch YouTube videos, but it is certainly humiliating when like your friends or someone looks at them because you just look like an idiot.
Well, you certainly have a good attitude toward it and a good sense of humor. Rory, could you imagine if I had, that idea? I'm like, okay, green screen poses now, like zany Dave Meyer faces.
If you made me do that, I would never look at the Instagram feed again. That would be the rule. You can do it, but I'll never see it.
It's so bad. Yeah, it's only BiggerPockets does it. Even though I know it would work for social media, I just refuse to do it for my own feed. But it gets people to engage with the brand, which we love, and it's a little bit of a sensationalist kind of thumbnail, but the content behind it is good. So I stand by the content, and if it gets you to click on it and engage in the content, hopefully you learn something.
We learn a lot from you, Dave. If you want to follow Dave, which you should do if you're not doing already, it is at the Data Deli, correct?
That's right, on Instagram.
Yes. And you were not eating a sandwich when I met you, and I mentioned that. I'm like, wait a second, what's up with that? Like, you're a sandwich guy, apparently.
I am, but it was, we were like 2 days before the wedding. I had to eat a salad, even though I've never subscribed to that idea. But like that day, honestly, we had just gotten off like an 8-hour plane ride, and I just like they give you so salty food. I just needed like something fresh.
Well, I hope you had some lobster rolls while you're in New England.
So many, unbelievable amounts.
There's never enough lobster rolls.
Yeah, at least 10.
Dave, we really appreciate your time today. This has been a delightful conversation. I would have you on all the time if we could, but you're a busy guy and you got BPCon coming up. We will put links in all the show notes for how you can get tickets if you haven't bought. If are there any available still or no?
They're going fast. They do
Okay.
always sell out.
Yep.
Every year we've done it, they've sold out. So if you're interested, check them out. And they do go up in price the closer they get to the actual date. So if you are interested, sooner the better.
Love that yield revenue management. That is the
Hmm.
strategy. I had
Oh,
a
I don't
guess.
even know what they're.
No,
Yeah.
I had a guest our short-term rental that, she's checking in. She's like, "Hey, I noticed the price change for the week after mine." I'm like, "You booked it 6 months ago, and
Yeah.
the price, yeah, it's like an airline,
Yeah,
Anyway,
of course. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's different.
Yes. But you're doing the right thing.
Yeah. Hey, Rory, where can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more about you?
Just go to rorygill.com and you'll see the different ways to work with and get a hold of me.
All right. And if you want to be a guest on the podcast, you can reach out to me, Jason at nexthometitletown.com. Drop us a comment, leave us a 5-star review, go follow Dave, go download On the Market, go download BiggerPockets, all that stuff. You're going to be much more informed if you're not doing that already. Dave, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And we can't wait to have you back.
Anytime. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.